I thought Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 was my game of the year. Locked in, done. Then Clair Obscur Expedition 33 landed, and the early reviews were hyping it up to levels last seen on Baldur's Gate 3's release. I was mid-oblivion getting footage and nearly ignored it because of its turn-based combat, which is new to me. Baldur's Gate, Wasteland, Divinity, even Civilization are some of my all-time favorites, but this nearly slipped past. Everywhere I looked, people were calling it a masterpiece, the new game of the year frontrunner, genre-defining, so I dove in. 48 hours later, I was in love. This is one of the most emotionally gripping, visually stunning RPGs I've ever played, and is potentially going down as an all-timer for me. Let's take a look now at what makes Clair Obscur Expedition 33 so special. So let's address the elephant in the room, turn-based combat. I know for a fact this is where a lot of people hesitate. Hell, even I gave it the side eye at first, and I'm not new to this. Turn-based games technically include the like of Pokemon, the Wasteland series, Divinity, Civ, and Age of Empires. These are my bread and butter growing up, but for some reason, when I first looked at Clair Obscur, I didn't take it seriously. That was a mistake, because not only does the combat work, it's one of the things that makes the game so addictive. From the very first fight, the game introduces its core twist, a dodge and parry system layered into its turn-based structure. And this isn't some gimmick. Dodging and parrying are essential. Miss one, you might lose half your health. Miss a few, that's a wipe. And mobs hit multiple times per turn. The dopamine hit from landing a perfect parry is wild. Dodging gives you some breathing room, sure, but parrying, timing the exact frame and returning a hit, that gives a rush like no other. To land a counter, you have to parry every hit in the combo. Miss one, and you get nothing. The damage return can scale based on damage amplifiers, and late game, bosses force you to learn their patterns and adapt. Some fights even feature 6 to 8 attack strings that all require individual parries. It's a massive tension reward loop. And at that point, the enemies start getting trickier. Fake outs, combos with delayed final hits, weird telegraphs. There's one early tournament boss whose entire design is meant to mess with your timing. You learn it the hard way, but it never feels cheap, just challenging in the best way. There's an optional boss at the very start area that's green. I spent a stupid amount of time adapting to its double brush attack, but once I did, I had a deep understanding on the reward system involved with this combat system. And it turns out that foe was significantly more challenging than the main area boss. And the best part of this system, the game is accessible even if you suck at this. My girlfriend isn't a gamer, and she played through on a story mode difficulty with a hyper tanky build, and she got really good at parrying by the end. The game adjusts. Easier modes have looser timing windows and reduced damage, but for those who do lean into the mechanics, the depth here runs deep. Now, layer this on top of the rest of the combat systems. You have characters with customizable personal skill trees, each with up to 6 active abilities to choose from. You can spec Mael for burn stacking, damage amplification on stacks, crit bonuses, or go in an entirely different direction. Skills synergize with builds, and those builds are shaped by weapons, stat allocation, and the game's most brilliant combat system, Pictos and Luminas. Pictos are passive modifiers you equip, each giving stat boosts and unique effects. Use one in 4 fights, and it becomes unlocked in your shared Luminas pool. Luminas let you assign those unlocked Pictos across all characters using a point cap based on a collectible item. Pictos can't be shared simultaneously, but Luminas can. So the strategy becomes who equips what, which Lumina is more worth, which Pictos do you use for stat boosts versus passive buffs. This was super interesting to me. Stat allocation is flexible too. Each level gives you 3 points to spread across 5 attributes: might, defense, agility, vitality, and luck. Agility doesn't just affect turn order, it plays a subtle defensive role, and yes, you can respec often. Reset items are easy to get from vendors and found across the world. Then come the weapons. Each has a base power, an elemental type, unique passive skills at levels 4, 10, and 20, and a letter grade scaling with a particular stat. So if a weapon scales with vitality and your vitality is cracked, that's your go-to, and these are plentiful. Each character eventually gets 10 to 12 plus weapons, offering a ton of flexibility. By Act 3, you're no longer just managing characters, you're managing build ecosystems. One of my characters was a debuff setup, another did crit burst when debuffs were present, another focused entirely on utility in different fight scenarios. The synergy setups are addicting, and it all paced out perfectly with the game's structure. Early on, you want to land your hits and not die. Mid-game, you're crafting viable builds. Late game, you're theory crafting party-wide strategies. Even enemy designs support this pacing. Some enemies fly, physical hits won't hit them as often. Some absorb elemental damage instead of taking damage. Others have weak spots you have to aim for, or mechanics that can only be beaten with parries. Some enemies literally force parries. The game keeps giving you new tools between big narrative moments. New mechanics, mobility upgrades, skill extensions, all fed at the perfect pace. It never goes stale. And in my review of South of Midnight, I called out that by hour 8, the combat was already repeating itself. That is absolutely not the case here. This game has used its narrative beats as a driving force for keeping you locked in, but between these, it reveals importance in different combat systems, some newly revealed, or something like Pictos and Luminas that get explained at the very beginning, but as you get more and more, they begin to form the ability to shape playstyles that will change how you perceive each combat scenario. Because of this, Clair Obscur's combat is a core part of its pacing and addiction loop. It doesn't just support the story and flow of the game, it enhances it, and for a turn-based system, that's pretty noteworthy. Pairing this ever-evolving combat experience with the adrenaline rush that is the parry system, and what you get is magic. If you've ever written off turn-based combat, it offers more than most real-time systems ever do. The first thing you'll notice when playing Clair Obscur is just how stunning the game looks. But what actually locks you in, what actually makes you overly obsessed with this world, is the story and narrative. I went in knowing almost nothing about this game. I'd see some vague references to a paintress and something about people wiped from existence, but that was it. Within the first 15 minutes, this game laid out a hammer of a narrative beat that absolutely rocked me. It was sudden, devastating, and it pulled me in instantly. I was shook, but I had to know more. What was this world? Why was it like this? Who was behind it? That moment unleashed the floodgates of my curiosity. 5 minutes later, I was deep in it. The world was already unraveling around me. Beautifully twisted enemy designs, haunting backdrops, and characters who felt immediately grounded in pain, duty, and mystery. The game doesn't dump exposition or front-load a bunch of lore. Instead, it drips it out across 3 major acts, each one with a distinct emotional tone and purpose. That's important. A lot of games label story sections as acts, but it's just a structural checkpoint. Here, the acts are loaded with narrative weight. Act 1 lays the emotional foundation, Act 2 starts pulling threads together, and Act 3 brings it all to a boil, and then delivers one of the most deeply satisfying finales I've ever seen in a game. It's like the complete opposite to the horrible feeling you had on the Game of Thrones finale when you realize all that time invested fell flat in the end. The way this game withholds information until the exact right moment, the way it resists the urge to over-explain, is something most studios just don't have the discipline to do, and this isn't just in the video game market, this is a curse of storytelling from a top level looking down. Even when you're not following the main story, the deep unraveling of the world's lore stays with you. There's side content, some silly, some fun, but most of it actually expands on the main narrative in subtle, powerful ways. You'll learn more about the characters you thought you already knew. You'll uncover past events that reframe current motivations. It's not required, but it's there for anyone who wants to dig deeper, and I absolutely recommend that you do. The themes here are heavy: grief, loss, coping, but more than that, it feels like a quiet allegory for addiction, how we fill voids, how we avoid grief by reaching for something else, anything else to numb the pain. The emotional through line is clear from the very first gut punch, and it only deepens as the story unfolds. This isn't a game purely about shock value. It does have a lot of that, to be fair, but it's a game about emotional resonance. It's careful, layered, and it trusts the player to pay attention. This is driven all the way home by the amazing performances by familiar Hollywood names like Charlie Cox and Andy Serkis. Yes, Smeagol and Daredevil are some of the heavy emotional performances, but familiar video game voice actors Ben Starr and Jennifer English are powerhouses that fully drive this game into its emotional climax. I think the animators, the physical actors, and the voiceover team need a full round of applause for taking the brilliant material brought to them by the writing team and bringing it to life in this. Now, if you do pay attention throughout the story, you're rewarded in a way most games don't even attempt. There's a new game plus built in, and it's not just for min-maxing or to continue unlocking skill trees. On a second playthrough, the story literally transforms. All those weird glances, the out-of-place dialogue, suddenly they make sense, and not just surface-level sense, deep, lore-rich, and character-driven clarity. It's the kind of second run that makes the first one even better in hindsight. I'll save the spoiler-heavy details for the spoiler talk section at the end of the video, but trust me, if you finish the game and think you're done, you're not. You're only halfway through understanding what this world really is. Don't get me wrong, a single playthrough is fine. It's a completely fine endpoint. But as one of the few Tenet movie enjoyers who saw it multiple times in theaters for the full scope of the narrative, this story has a bit of that same sauce with the repeat playthrough, until the scope of the story is fully revealed, that is. And in regards to the ending, it doesn't just wrap the plot, it asks a pretty serious philosophical question that I'm still thinking about days later. A choice that cuts right to the core of what it means to grieve, to move on, or to hold on to something that maybe shouldn't still exist. It's philosophical, even existential, in a way I wasn't expecting, and made the conclusion that much more powerful. This is easily one of the best told stories I've ever experienced in a video game. Every act, every twist, every bit of foreshadowing, it all pays off. The writing is that strong, and the way the narrative is visually and emotionally directed, from major cinematics to subtle character moments, make it a masterclass in restraint and impact. I cannot imagine a more powerful story will get thoroughly fleshed out as well as Clair Obscur in the video game medium this year. So if you play this game for one reason, let it be the story. It's worth every second, and I cannot praise the writers enough. You'd think with this somewhat small team of mostly first-time devs, Sandfall might struggle to deliver more than the already noted phenomenal writing and addictive combat loop. But somehow, they also built one of the most surprisingly massive and rewarding game worlds I've explored in recent memory. Let's start with the structure. Clair Obscur is split into a series of major zones, all connected by a stylized overworld. Think old-school RPG traversal. Your character becomes a towering figure as you dash between regions at exaggerated speed. It reminds me of Civ or Age of Empires, or even Pokemon on the Game Boy Advance, where scale is abstracted to make movement fast and intuitive. I was initially worried about accidentally accessing zones I wasn't ready for, but the game handles this smoothly. Locked areas are clearly zoned off, and your next story objective is always visible on the map. It has a sort of tilt-shift photography effect going on, making everything look a little toyish, but definitely a fun perspective. And once you've been playing for a few hours, this is when the scale begins to dawn on you. Clair Obscur provides so much area and space, and it fills it with reasons to stop, explore, and experiment. It fills it with side bosses, mini dungeons, parkour challenges, lore entries, and meaningful collectibles. Exploration feels like a full gameplay loop. I'm not talking about find the thing, check the box. I'm talking about wandering off the main path, finding a boss twice as hard as the one you just fought in the story, as this kind of seems like the case every single time. Then wiping 10 times until you finally master the parry timings and pull off a flawless run. This happens so often and is intrinsic to the gameplay and exploration experience. There's this green side boss early on, just a little off the main route. He was brutal. At that point, I was still doing chip damage, trying to land my parries and wondering if I'd made a mistake stepping into his arena with him. But when I finally beat him, when I finally overcame his double brush timing, that rush was unreal. These moments are all over the game. Side bosses often outclass main story bosses in terms of difficulty and require real adaptation, timing, strategy, and sometimes a completely reworked build. And the loot, it's definitely enjoyable. Weapons, rare Pictos, chroma, it all feeds into the progression. But it's not just combat. The side content is absurdly varied. You got parkour courses, volleyball, an underground fight club, and even a zone that feels like a taste of Only Up. These aren't throwaway distractions. They're legitimately a super fun layer to everything that this game has to offer, and they don't feel checklisty or procedural. They feel discovered and super fun every time you stumble on a more wacky one than the last. And the world wants you to find these things. Clair Obscur constantly rewards curiosity. If you see an offshoot path or an odd edge, there's probably something there. Camp music records, cosmetics, new weapons, combat upgrades, hidden behind waterfalls, tucked into cliffs, perched on unreachable looking ledges. It all encourages the same question: what if I check over there? And while the exploration feels old school in a good way, the lack of minimap and zones might trip some people up. I was fine, I've got a decent internal compass, but my girlfriend, who doesn't, got turned around a lot. The game gives you a great macro map, but a local zone overlay would have helped. There was one moment I stepped away for a snack for 5 minutes and came back completely disoriented. It's not a deal breaker, but it's a quality of life thing worth noting at the least. The overworld evolves too. At first, I made the mistake of backtracking on foot and it sucked, but then the game unlocks shortcuts and traversal upgrades that speed everything up, so it's not punishing. It just wants you to commit a little before giving you that fast pass. And speaking of commitment, let's talk about the lore. The side content here isn't just fluff. There are entire character backstories, world mechanics, and emotional threads that are only explained if you go looking. You learn about characters' past, about SKA's connection to other party members, and even about Nevrons and their strange role in this world. Even journal entries from failed expeditions offer dark insights into what came before. for you, as they are typically the final message before an expedition wipes, providing insight for future groups to not make the same mistake. Expedition 60 being a standout due to its peculiarity. It's wild how many threads the game lets you uncover, questions that feel like plot holes. They're not. You just haven't found the right journal or conversation yet, and the game doesn't shove that in your face. It lets you opt in. That respect for player agency makes the world feel richer, and makes every discovery feel like just that, a discovery on a world that is truly fascinating, making you want to know as much about it as you possibly could. Clair Obscur's world isn't just big, it's rewarding. Whether you're hunting loot, chasing world lore, or wondering what's over the next ridge, the game constantly gives you a reason to keep going. And in a year full of massive RPGs, that level of care and density still manages to stand out. The first thing you notice when booting up Clair Obscur is how good it looks and sounds. Not good for an indie or impressive for a debut, I mean actually stunning. The game looks like something made by a giant studio with unlimited resources, not a first-timer team of 30 core members. The quality hits you immediately. High fidelity visuals, gorgeous lighting, and a phenomenal score. Interestingly, the game is literally about art. Pictos, chroma, tints, gradients, the painterest, it's all baked into the world's DNA. And yet instead of leaning on that as a crutch or gimmick, Sandfall backs it up with one of the most visually distinct, consistently creative art directions I've seen in years. Surrealism is the obvious influence, but the artistry evolves the deeper you go, shifting from ethereal to decayed, and at times outright nightmarish. Environments feel like actual works of art, layered in detail, mood, and tone. I have hours of footage of just landscapes in this game, as it is just so beautiful and cinematic. I love going to each and every zone to see how the artist tweaked the formula and created a new layer on this canvas. Enemy design is just as strong. Early on, you're fighting what feels like elemental soldier constructs, but the deeper you go, the more abstract, twisted, and visually surreal the foes become. There's a mid-game boss, a bladed humanoid, in a blood-drenched chamber of corpses. The fight for me wasn't that difficult, but left one of the biggest impressions on me because of the style and cinematic aspects of this interaction. From the intro sequence, it is clear there's a real variety of enemy design, and some of it clearly inspired from Software's popular aesthetic. That level of visual creativity and menace persists through the entire game. A lot of the side bosses are absolute standouts too, even if I imagine most players will sadly miss them. Character design is another huge success. Each party member feels completely distinct, visually, thematically, and mechanically. One character you recruit in the mid-game literally learns new attacks by absorbing the techniques of enemies you defeat. Another brings fire synergy to the entire party. Even Esquier, your non-human travel buddy, has this absurdly lovable and physically expressive design. He's a personal favorite for a reason. His lines, movements, and surprise strength make him both a meme and a monster. My girlfriend and I literally spent hours shouting, "Swim, swim!" And it's not just your team. The world is filled with creatures like Gestrels, mask-wearing, brush-bodied warriors who love to fight and rarely understand what's going on. Their comedy hits surprisingly hard. One scene where you have to enter a password, I spent a few moments trying to decipher it, only for the Gestrel to shrug and go, "Well, I don't know the answer either, just come on in." This mix of emotional weight and comedic timing is rare, and somehow it works. The game lets itself breathe with levity when needed, and it never feels jarring. Now, let's talk about the music. I'm not exaggerating when I say this might be one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard in a video game. Every single track lands. The underwater area's pulse-pounding EDM, the soaring orchestration during major reveals, and Monaco's introduction theme, absolute cinema. And the way the game remixes the title track into different emotional contexts, haunting. These aren't just background songs, they're woven into the identity of every moment. The composer has been getting a lot of hype online, and this was just because he was found on some forum. No big portfolio, no major credits, just a raw, passionate musician who happened to care about video game music, and Sandfall gave him the chance to create something incredible. That story alone would be cool, but the actual output, it's incredible. And the angelic female lead voice they got for the soundtrack is just chef's kiss, haunting and ethereal. Even ambient audio supports all of this. Environmental sounds shift with your location, and combat effects feel weighty, and the use of silence at key moments builds tension in a way few games manage. The entire game feels directed, not just designed. Visual cues, animation, framing, and lighting all work together to elevate key scenes without spelling everything out. Glances between characters carry subtext. Cinematics let emotion simmer rather than over-explaining. It's the kind of subtle presentation most AAA studios forget how to do, or just ignore. In the end, Clair Obscur doesn't just look or sound good, it knows how to use those elements. Art and music aren't surface level here, they're core to how the story is told. It's confident, intentional, and way too polished for a first-time dev team. Every frame, every beat, every joke, it all lands harder than it has any right to, and is a large part of what makes this game so distinct, and what I imagine will cause some slight tweaks in how games are made going forward. Now, as we wrap this video up, I must say this once again. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 isn't just a beautifully made RPG. It's a deeply powerful story about grief, about loss, about what we do when we're powerless to stop something from being taken from us. The first 10 minutes of the game show you that clearly, and from there, it becomes a slow, steady unraveling of how each character copes or fails to cope with that pain. Some turn to memory, some to violence, but it's all there, layered into the world, the dialogue, the silence between words. And while it never says outright, I honestly think Clair Obscur is one of the best allegories for addiction I've seen in a game. The idea of clinging to something artificial, something dangerous, just to make the hurt go away, it hit way harder than I expected. The further I got in, the more I realized how intentional this all was. The pacing, the restraint, the way the story doesn't give you every answer. It trusts you to pay attention, to seek it out in some cases. And when you do, the payoff is massive. By the end of Act 3, you're not just asked to fight, you're asked to make a choice. One that genuinely has puzzled me a week later as I write this, because it seems obvious at first, but the more you think about it, the more complicated it becomes. The philosophical implications of this decision at first don't seem that large, but as you think about it more, the scale in which that decision affects is massive and has left me pondering. I won't spoil it here, but I'm still thinking about the answer days later, and that's what pushed this great game to something more for me. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 was supposed to be my lock-in for Game of the Year. I said it, I believed it, and in most ways, it still ticks every box I care about. Realism, immersion, system-driven depth. But this game is generally great from all angles. I am beyond happy with my time with it. Not just impressed, not just entertained, I felt gut punched, I felt conflicted, I felt kind of stunned by how well it all landed in the end as a package. And this isn't just me saying that. I've gotten most of my Lost Ark static playing this. My Stardew-loving girlfriend is deep into it. Even Mark, who normally just plays shooters, is hooked. There's something here for everyone, and it's the emotional weight that ties it all together. The pure genius of its story's pacing, paired with the mechanical unlocks, kept me locked in for 48 hours as I binged this all-timer for me. So, is it perfect? I think it can be argued it's pretty close to it if it isn't. But does it come close to being one of the most complete, confident, and affecting games I've played in years? Yeah, easily. Well, this is the end of the video, and what was supposed to be the transition to the spoilers section. I've opted to remove that from this video since its length made this a 34-minute video, and that's a lot of time for someone to sit through a video for. For those interested in hearing me glaze and gush story beats and character moments, stay tuned for when I upload that in a few days. It's about 9 minutes of story recap and a look at the game's final moments and how that affected me. I really love my time with this game, and I hope that was conveyed well in this video. I'm fairly new to reviewing video games, but am trying to adjust things in each review to get better each time. Any like or comment goes a long way, and a subscription shows me this content is working. I will be looking at finally touching on a look at the RPG that made me fall in love with the genre, Oblivion, or a few smaller reviews in the meantime as I put some time into that big one. I did recently try out the beta for Dune Awakening, and I have some thoughts on it. I will leave you with this. What part of the game was the most impressive to you? My name is Easy Brick, and I will see you in the next one. Toodaloo.